All right, this is the weekly market recap for the trading week ending July 17th, 2026. I'm going to be pulling up different funds and securities. I'm not recommending these funds. I just have a familiarity with them and I know what's in them, so I'm talking about them, but I'm not telling anybody to buy these. I worked at Vanguard for over 13 years, so these are the funds I'm familiar with. These first four funds cover the publicly traded US and international stock and bond markets. All this information is from Yahoo Finance, and this whole stream is for education. So the first fund we want to go over is the total US stock market index fund, or VTI, was down 1.52%. The total international stock index fund, or VXUS, was down 2.31%. So there's a bunch of different things going on in the news, but it's really hard to pinpoint exactly why the entire market dipped. Is it confrontations with Iran? Is it the economy? Is it something else? It's really hard to know for certain why a particular market or the entire market would go down. But this week, both the international and domestic stock markets have gone down. Let's see what that means for the bond market. So the total US bond market was up, mostly flat, but up 0.12%. And the total international bond market index, BNDX, and the total bond market index, I'm sorry, is BND. And the total international bond market index is BNDX, was down 0.31%. So bonds are interesting. Bonds are generally downside protection against the stock market. So when you see stock markets going down, a lot of the time you see bond markets get propped up a little bit and their prices rise during that. I don't believe we had any sort of rate news one way or another. So this slight bump in the US market could be for no reason. It could be because the stock markets were down. We're not sure, but they were relatively flat. But if you had a broadly diversified portfolio this week, you were likely down. The most important thing is you understand why you're invested in what you're invested in. If you understand that, then these movements don't really matter. Like for me, if the stock market went down 90%, I'm still sleeping like a baby at night. And I'm looking to sell maybe this computer so that I can buy more shares of stock, but I have an aggressive risk tolerance. That's not how everyone is. If the market movements are making you uncomfortable, you need to understand why you're invested in what you're invested in. Then these movements won't matter to you as much. If you feel uncomfortable, reach out to me and we can talk about it. The next thing we're going to cover here is gold. So gold was down 2.06%. Silver was down even more at 6.09%. Let's check out copper. Copper was up 0.48%. So gold and silver are your traditional precious metals value retainers, historical value retainers. And copper, the reason I started looking at copper and bringing it up is it is a precious metal, but there are potential use cases for it over the next 20 years that we haven't seen in the previous 100 years. So it's just another precious metal that I'm keeping an eye on. Again, I'm not telling anybody to buy it. It's just something that I'm looking at. But if you look at it over the last 5 years, it's gone up almost 50%. Whereas we compare it to silver, it's gone up almost 120%, and gold up over 120%. But now, let's have some fun here. Let's get into Bitcoin. This can be a pretty controversial topic. Some people call it digital gold. I don't believe it carries that same thing, but there are a lot of Bitcoin believers. There are a lot of Bitcoin haters out there. But either way, Bitcoin was up 0.52% over the previous 5 days. Now, Bitcoin is a little bit different than these other securities that we're talking about. It is technically almost 5:30 p.m. on July 17th, 2026. Bitcoin trades 24/7, so its price movements are a little bit harder to track than, not harder to track, sorry, but it trades more frequently and you can't line it up as well against other securities. But if we look at its 5-year, it's up over 100%, which is fairly similar to these traditional precious metals. So if you're interested in Bitcoin, it's the same thing. You want to understand why you're invested in it. If you understand why you're invested in it, then the outside noise doesn't matter. But I do recommend that you make decisions based on you, not necessarily following what someone else tells you to do. All right. Now, let's cover crude oil. This had a rapid rebound. I'm assuming this is because of uh, recent attacks on Iran. I believe we attacked every day for the last 4 or 5 days, but it jumped over 14% at 14.42% over this trading week, which is interesting because it had a pretty steep drop off from a high all the way down into the 60s, and now we're back up over 80. So this could be placebo, but I felt like I saw this at the pump when I filled up today or yesterday, whatever it was. So it's interesting that when oil prices rise, we feel it immediately at the gas pump, but when oil prices drop, they tend to be a little bit slower on lowering gas prices. So that is the weekly market recap for the trading week ending July 17, 2026. So if you have questions over how you're invested, why you're invested, reach out. Let's schedule a conversation. We can have it live on stream, and our conversation may be able to help countless people out in the world, because any question that you have, I promise you, someone else in the world has it as well. But let's get you comfortable with your portfolio so you can sleep at night.